Hello, this is Neil Chef,
And I'm Katie Holmes.
and you are listening to the Don't Do That, Do This podcast.
In this episode, we have Madeleine Mendy, who is an expert on family law. She heads up the family law department for Sevan Advocates and has been in the region for over 10 years with a huge amount of expertise and a lot of passion for this subject. It's a really fascinating topic. Please listen in, and if you know anybody that would benefit from listening to Madeleine's advice, then please share it with them.
Yeah, you're honestly going to love this episode. And more importantly, we have so many interesting stories and insights coming up. So, as you know, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to make sure that you get future podcasts.
Thank you.
This podcast wouldn't have been possible without the following teams. Rightfully for storytelling and thought leadership, Studio Red for the quality podcast studio and video production, and Sherbet Lemon for branding, social media design and editing.
Madeleine, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. Also, as January is such a busy month for you, you're kind of just through that busy period in terms of divorces, and that's the topic of today's podcast. Before we go into any more detail, I'd love you just to sort of share, how you arrived into family law. What's your story?
Thank you for having me. Family law, I've always known that I wanted to be a lawyer. I took the decision, I'll call it taking the decision, when I was around 11. I was living with my family in France. And from that time, I nurtured that idea that one day I'll be able to be a lawyer. And fast forward, maybe I would say 10 to 15 years, I arrived in England, worked as a nanny first to learn to speak English, and then started university in Bristol. So, and a few years later, I qualified and started my career in England first. And then I moved to Dubai 12 years ago. So initially, I wasn't a divorce lawyer. I was a child law lawyer. So I used to specialize in child protection issues. But when I arrived in Dubai at the time, I couldn't find child protection work. It was believed that there wasn't any child protection issues in 2012. So the next thing in the family law world is divorces. So I started with that, and it's been good 12 years, busy 12 years.
And we've been speaking before this interview about how busy January has been for you. So tell us why January is particularly a very busy month.
It's the busiest month of the year for all lawyers everywhere in the world. So it's not just a Dubai thing, but generally people would have spent time together at Christmas, probably spent money they don't have.
Too much time?
Had probably too much time with each other. The whole pattern of going to work, seeing each other for 2 hours a day, at the end of the day when everyone is tired, is broken. You're now spending 24 hours with someone, with your spouse, for maybe a week or 2 weeks. The in-laws are involved. It's a big mix of feelings of people and resentment. And also you have the New Year's resolution where you think, right, actually this year wasn't that great. I'm tired of this relationship. Let me move on to something new. So the first Monday of January is the busiest Monday in terms of divorces anywhere in the world.
What does that mean for COVID? Was that like 24 hours shop open for you?
Yes. I mean, the return of COVID, the boomerang effect, because during 2020 was fine because people was trying to survive, right? But we started seeing the aftermath of COVID in 2021 and 2022. For us, I see for my practice, since March 2022, it's been just expanding. Normally, we have a calendar for lawyers. So January is very high, then you go down. March, April, we had Ramadan time where things quieten down, come up a little bit just before the summer, and then the summer is supposed to be dead quiet. September starts again with the kidnappings, people who have stayed home during the summer and don't want to come back. So you would have all of that. Also a little bit of divorces. And then towards Christmas, it comes down. So really we had 2 or 3 peaks in the year, but since March 2022, it's just been one one straight line of increasing cases daily.
And who are your clients? Is it largely expats or?
So yes, mostly expats. I have a few local Emirati clients, but those are really a few. Most of them are expats from different corners of the world.
And when you get an inquiry into the office, is it from the husband or the wife?
Funny enough, I get all sorts of inquiries, but mainly I act. So in the end, I mainly act more for men than women. Although I do a lot of work online for women, a lot of pro bono work, but for some reason, men retain me more. And there's another colleague in the city he's a man, he has the women for some reason. And we discussed it, I remember years ago. And I was discussing it with other colleagues, and they were saying, I think sometimes women would rather have advice, especially when they've been in a relationship with a strong man. They'll rather have advice or be led by another man than taking advice from a woman.
There must be so much psychology behind the divorce element. And what sort of reasons are there? Are there kind of top 3 reasons for divorce?
Top 3 reasons: people, and this is just particular to Dubai, people getting married that shouldn't have got married in the first place. So you had all that wave of people that got married because they needed to live together and they needed to move to Dubai. You also have the wave of people who, before the change in legislation, got married because someone fell pregnant, whether a one-night stand or long-term relationship, and they should have never been married. So after a few years, you see the aftermath of that in the divorce courts. So that's in the divorce courts. That's the first one. The second one, I will say, is an imbalance in the relationship in terms of expectations. You have a lot of people who had a standard setup when they were living at home, and then once they moved into Dubai, one of them won't be working. Generally, the husband will have a higher income, and the wife doesn't need to work. And one of them will then either decide to meet a third party. That's one of our biggest reasons for divorces. And the third one, I think I will say, people grow apart. There is this misconception, and I really think as a divorce lawyer, it's a misconception that we need to love each other all the time in a marriage. And that's not the reality. Marriage, love comes and goes. Hate also comes and goes. But for some reason, Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood made us believe that actually, no, you're going to have kids and live happily ever after. And that's not the reality. There's a disconnection there, especially with social media and couples showcasing themselves. And people will look around and think, oh, these guys are happier than me. In fact, they're not. We love each other and we don't, but we stay together.
I know that you're very well regarded in the expat community. So on the Facebook pages, I often see your tag, or I'll tag you. And in your experience, does therapy help? Like you're always recommending that, but does it really help majority of cases?
I think it helps either way. So you have the typical person that'll come in and say, right, I want to get divorced. I have thought about it for some time. I'm dead set. Let's go. And every client that I speak to on a first time basis, I always send them to a therapist. Why? First, to see whether the marriage is really dead, but also if it is, then find a more holistic way to break up than to fight through lawyers' letters. I think that's the best way to do it.
Outside of court.
Yes. Court will ultimately be involved to make your order and whatever, but especially when there are children involved, we have to do better.
It's very tough. Just on that, so this is more of a personal question, but you're dealing with a very sensitive and emotional issue. How do you, as someone practicing this, which runs that business and that organization, how do you disassociate yourself?
The problem with family law is you don't. I wish I could say to you, of course you're able to do this, so that actually you don't. Yesterday I was upset because I felt I'd worked really hard on a case, and a client wasn't happy not happy with the result, but decided that she wanted to seek advice somewhere else, because she'd called me after a certain hour in the night,
Yeah.
and I wasn't able to be present, and it really upset me. I stopped everything I was doing, first to try and get hold of the person, but also to write and say, look, this is my perspective. You feel like when I take on a case for me, I'm carrying that person on my back. And I know maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but emotionally, eventually you do, because you want the best outcome for them. Divorces are not just about money. It's a tough time that people go through.
And just another scenario, like connected to this. So you've got kids involved,
Yes.
and you're representing someone that I guess that has approached you, and you have to do the best for them.
Yes.
So how do you deassociate yourself from that situation, in the sense that there's kids involved, you know what the ramifications are, and this is kind of like there's a wider question here. Like, as entrepreneurs or people in business, you have to often leave the office and go, look, what's happened during the day has happened to you, but now I need to be present in my family.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's more truer for you in your role, because of what you are impacting lives, so how do you deal with that?
I mean,
Or is it just tough?
it's really tough, but at some point you just have to pull the plug and say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. The day has to end, even if you take it in your sleep and you think about it throughout the night, it just has to end and you stop there. But I like what you said about people having children also, and I think as divorce lawyers, we have a duty as lawyers to draw the line where children are involved. Yes, you come to see me, you want to win. I'll give you a win as long as it doesn't impact your children. And that's really where I draw the line with some of my clients. Most of them are men, and they'll say, right, Maddie. And I always ask them, what do you want? Do you want the kids or do you want the money? So I know what strategy to give you. But I will never take on a client that is going to put his children at a detriment, or his aim is to harm the children ultimately, whether intentionally or not. That's where I draw the line.
And I suppose that's your child protection
Yeah.
element coming through, aligning
Yes.
very nicely in that sense. So again, I'll just sort of share some kind of rumors, if you like, around divorce that I've heard. So majority of cases, if it's adultery, then it will be, people say it's always the men. But what trends are you seeing?
Actually, it's not always the men. And I will debunk that very quickly. You see a lot of women committing adultery. I'm only talking about Dubai because that's the experience I've had. And you do see a lot of women committing adultery. Maybe not with commercial partners, but with people that they feel that they're able to confide with. So let's say you would have if you look at the typical expat family with the wife running away from the Dubai heat and then going home for the summer, they'll rekindle with ex-boyfriends on Facebook, or people they had crush with in the past, or someone from their hometown, and they will leave. In the experience that I've had, men will entertain outside relationships, and as long as they don't get caught, they will stay. But a woman, if she feels that her emotional needs are met by the third party, they will often leave the marriage itself.
Very interesting. And in the 12 years you've been in the region, have you seen changes in trends around divorces and reasons why?
I think what we've seen a trend in, and I talk to other divorce lawyers, is what I call the quick marriage, quick divorce. It's now easier to get married. I mean, if you are living in the Emirates, you can go into Abu Dhabi and get married in 24 hours if you pay the right amount of money, or you can literally walk in, pay 2,500 dirhams at 9 o'clock, and at midday you'll be married. And the problem with those is not with the marriage institution itself, is with those couples that are going through that. They're often couples that don't know each other, or couples that have met each other and are probably still in the bubbles of the first month. And we see them within 2 years. The amount of divorces that we've seen that are resulting from these quick marriages. So that I think is a bigger trend. And also, of course, you have those families. Dubai is a multicultural place where I don't think I've been in a city where you see so many mixed marriages. So it could be mixed nationalities, mixed culture, and mixed religion. And the problem with those relationships, when you don't manage them properly, is when a child is born, that's where those differences really come on. And I've seen a lot of cases recently where people are breaking up because of the way they are deciding to raise their children, and those ways are completely different from one person to another.
I feel like you could do a scorecard. Like if you are this nationality, this age, this, and you only met 3 weeks ago, or, and your chances of divorce based on my experience are very high.
Yes.
Okay, a serious question here, which to someone listening to this podcast and going through a tough time in their relationship, what's 2 or 3 things you would recommend they do as early on as possible before they pick up the phone and speak to you?
I would say lock in, don't give up. That'll be the first thing I'll say.
Is that like lock him or her in?
I mean, lock into the relationship. Don't give up on the relationship yet. Number 2, go and see a therapist, and a qualified therapist that's going to be able to help you and also help your partner iron out the issues that you have. And then also a life coach. For me, I make the difference between a psychologist and a life coach. A life coach that will probably help you understand where you want to take your life, but also make non-emotional decisions in terms of the next steps you want to take. Lawyers should really be your last resort. I always use this picture with my clients when they come in, and they say, look, if you imagine someone about to jump off of a cliff, that's your marriage. If you fall off the cliff, I'm not the ambulance at the bottom. I am literally the funeral home's car that's taking the body.
Oh my God.
But that's the reality. People just pick up the phone. Sometimes I have people that call me and say, I need your advice. I want to get a divorce. And say, well, all right, calm down. When did you guys separate? Oh, last week. I'm like, no, go back. Go back. And I remember speaking to a lady not long ago, and she contacted me and said, she'd contacted me on the Instagram account. And then I spoke to her eventually, and we spoke for a little while. And I said, listen, you're not ready for a divorce. She said, well, you're a divorce lawyer, you're supposed to help me. And I said, you're not ready for a divorce. You need to go back, get the strength, get a life coach, get the strength, and also make sure that this is what you want. And then you can come back to me. Then she sent me another message on Instagram and saying, I don't understand why you told me on the phone that I'm not ready. This relationship is not a great relationship. And then I wrote back and said, look, I'm not telling you whether you should get divorced or not. That's a decision you have to make. But the reality is, divorce is a tough journey. If you think your marriage was bad, if the person on the other side is not a great person, you will see the worst of them through the divorce. So to be able to do that, you can't have your lawyer as an emotional crutch. You need to know, this is what I want. This is what I need to be done. And the only person that can give you that help is a life coach or a psychologist. So that's why I send them back. So I say to her, ultimately, if you want to get divorced, come in. I can't say no to the money, but it's going to leave you in a worse position. So sometimes divorce is not the answer, or not the answer yet. You need that strength to be able to go through the process, because it's a very hard process.
And finances comes into it, probably for some people predominantly. So how much access do you get to somebody's financial records? Because for argument's sake, somebody is planning on going through the divorce, they start squirreling money away. And in this region, it's quite typical that there's one person that controls the finances.
Yes.
So how much, as a family lawyer, how much confidence do you have that you see all of the financial positions?
Well, if you're getting divorced in the Dubai court, there's no financial disclosure. Absolutely none. And people are often surprised with that. So the principle when you get divorced in Dubai is what's in your name stays in your name. What's in joint name is divided 50-50. So there's no principle of disclosure like you would have in England or in common law jurisdiction, where they'll say, all right, let's see the last 12 months of your bank accounts. Let's see all of your bank accounts. Let's see your company's account. And then we're going to divide that 50-50. They don't do that in Dubai. Abu Dhabi has started that system where they look at the last 6 months worth of bank statement, but there's still no division of assets per se. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught out, because they will come in from the UK, from anywhere else in the world. They'll be buying properties. Often if it's only one person working, if it's the husband working, or sometimes even the wife, I have those cases, then they'll say, okay, they will decide with the mortgage provider, maybe it's easier to have the mortgage or faster to get a mortgage if we just put it in one person's name. Well, if you do that, if you get divorced, you lose that house. So if there's advice I have to give on that is make sure that whatever you buy, you have it in both names. If you have 2 cars, one car has to be in each party's name, because you don't want to be left with nothing.
That's really good advice. And there are also more rumors, just to share for you,
Yes.
to say yes or no, that it's better for a female to start the divorce procedures in Dubai than it would be in the UK from various reasons, and child maintenance,
Yes.
and also child custody.
Yes. I mean, and that's a big reality that people don't quite get their head around, because in the West, we've always had this rhetoric through the papers or the media that Muslim countries are against women rights. But when it comes to divorce in the UAE, especially in the Dubai court, I mean, they discriminate against men. The typical until the law changed recently, typically a woman will be provided automatic custody of her child up to a certain age. When that age kicked in, then for the father to be able to obtain custody, he needed to have either remarry or to have his mum or his sister living with him. And then the other condition was to show that the mother was not fit to look after that child. Which really, if you went in a common law jurisdiction, then we'll start on the 50-50 principle on custody. But mainly on finances, this is where if you're a working woman in Dubai, the family assets are in joint names, then you're better off divorcing here, because your salary you keep and your husband is responsible for the children's expenses. That's their rent, food and clothing, education, nanny, all of the children's expenses he's responsible for up to a certain level. And your salary is not taken into consideration to pay for the children's expenses. If you were in England, your salary goes in and will say, right, you have them half of the time, he has them half of the time. You probably don't need child maintenance. But here, child maintenance is always paid, and always in one direction, from men to women, never the other way around.
Just to clarify, so are you saying that the woman would always get custody, or that would be a decision on the back of the court process?
So up until 2022, which is when the new non-Muslim family law came in, women had automatic custody of their children. And then when they brought in the non-Muslim law, they brought in the 50-50 principle, where children were supposed to be spending time with parents equally. But the problem with that is there was still a bias towards women, because for the court it was unnatural for a child to not be with the mother. In Abu Dhabi it's different. Since they've opened the Abu Dhabi Civil Family Court, automatically upon divorce there's joint custody that's awarded. They're not doing that yet in Dubai. I had a judgment yesterday where I saw they had 50-50, but that's the first one I have seen in all these years.
Interesting.
Gosh. And so could somebody that was particularly vindictive see the children as a pawn in that?
Definitely. And I think some of the biggest victims of divorces are not the spouses, it's the children, because you move them around a bit like a game of chess to be able to recuperate money.
And also with, we've talked about the expats. So if somebody wants to go back to the UK and then one of the parents is here, how on earth does that work in terms of, do you have to have the decision in court to agree that there's a sign-off process believing the country?
That's one of the biggest problems we have outside of divorce in the expat community, is that when a relationship breaks down, one of the other parents is right, I want to go home and I'm taking the kids. Well, you can't. The kids home, these are, I call them, they're Dubai babies. I'm going to use a technical term, but in the courts we call it habitual residents. So they are babies who live, well, whatever their age. They are children who were raised in Dubai or grew up in Dubai. This Dubai is their home. And therefore, neither parent, whether it's the husband or the wife, can take them out of their living environment without the consent of the other or the approval of the court. But the court, I've never had a case where the court has approved for children to go with a parent. They don't normally do that.
So that ties the parent down to living here.
It ties them down to living
unless they choose to leave the kids.
Unless they choose to leave the kids. And you have parents who do runners. They don't come back after Christmas, or they don't come back after the summer holidays.
With the children.
With the children. And initially, when I first started, those parents would remain in the countries that they run to, whether it's England or New Zealand or wherever. But more and more now, even if the UAE is not a signatory to a Hague Convention, those children are brought back. So in the English courts sends the children back to the UAE.
So many considerations, so much education that the parents need to go through before they even, because it sounds like this is like that situation where they approach you and say, hey, we want a divorce. And then they learn all of that. And then they take 2 steps back.
Yes. And that's what you want them to do, suppose.
Yeah.
You want them to you want them to think it through. And that's why also it's important to have the right lawyers. I think in terms of divorces, lawyers play a massive part. You have people that come to you that are literally hemorrhaging. The first call you get from an inquiry, the person is panicking, like, right, I need advice, I need it now. You either calm them down and say, right, I can see you hurting, let me put a plaster, this is what's happening, let's try and find an amicable way. Or you say, right, let's get the guns out, we're going to get them, right? And that's the problem, because 9 out of 10, most lawyers will think that's the reaction that's required from them, to say, right, let's get the guns out and get them out, and actually just calm the whole situation down. We have a duty to calm the situation down, especially when there are children. I know we have billing targets, but really, if we do our jobs properly, we have to have the client in mind.
Can you, for those, for those watching this, listening to this, and potentially going through a tough time, and they're wondering, how much is this going to cost me? Like, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's the family, the kids, depending on the situation. They're splitting the assets, depending on the names.
Yes.
But when you go down the lawyer route, I don't know if this is a question where it's like, how long is a piece of string? But can you give some sort of indication?
If you go for a divorce by agreement, whether in Dubai or in England, I'll use England because that's where I plead, then generally it will cost you by agreement around 30 to 40,000 dirhams, which is still a fair chunk.
So by agreement means,
as in you both agree on how you're going to divide the assets.
Okay.
Who's spending time with the children, how much money.
It's like a sensible, amicable.
Yes. So you'll spend probably the best part of 40,000 dirhams on lawyers' costs and court fees. If you don't have an agreement and you fight it in the Dubai court, your minimum fee to instruct a local lawyer in the first instance is 50,000 dirhams as a flat fee each. So then if you're going to Court of Appeal and then the final court, cassation, you would have spent the best part of 100,000 dirhams to 150,000 dirhams on the lawyers each.
Yeah.
And translation cost. If you do this in England, we start at 40. I did a case recently where the lawyers' fees for both parties were in the region of £500,000.
Goodness me.
What? Good handbag fund. That's the reality.
And is that relative to the money at stake, or is that just
no, I've had
fees?
It's just the fees.
Wow.
And I've had cases before where even if the court encourages you to keep the fees down, where the parties have spent a third of their matrimonial part, lawyers' fees.
And we're talking dirhams, right? When you said
pound.
Oh, pounds. So when you said 40,000
£500,000.
and the 40,000,
The 40,000 was dirhams.
that was dirham.
That's for UAE. But if we're going to England, I will say an average divorce in England that's contested will cost you all the way to the final hearing a good £120,000.
And in Dubai, it's or UAE, it's
100,000 dirhams all.
100,000 dirhams. So that's another reason.
Yes. I mean, the only thing with Dubai is if your assets are not in joint names, then you're stuck. Right. You don't get, if the house is not in your name, Dubai is not going to give you the house.
There's a matrix in my head being formed, but
Yes.
okay.
Plan in advance.
Buy in joint names, everything. And it's not just about divorce. Let's say, God forbid, something happens to the main breadwinner, right? Then wills and probate will have to take over, whereby if you buy things jointly, you have emergency bank account and the accounts are in joint names, or you divide the amount in equal shares in different accounts that are offshore. You know, if that person drops or goes into intensive care, then there's still money. I was reading in one of the Facebook groups the other day, a woman, her husband was in intensive care. She didn't know how to pay. She didn't have the code of his card. She tried, then it was blocked. She didn't know how to pay the children's school fees.
Oh my God.
And the money was there in the account,
Yeah.
just can't access
Frustrating.
it. So it's not just about divorce. It's about financial planning for the whole family.
And that's something that we're really conscious of with even more British expats coming to the region. And quite often, I mean, I know when I came up 13 years ago, you couldn't have joint names or single. Everything was in my husband's name, and probably need to revise that. But things have moved on progressively in response to a burgeoning British community. But it's also, and this is why it's great having the time with you, it's to understand those nuances and to make sure that you have as much information on both sides so that you can act accordingly, hopefully amicably, and in the interests of the children, if there are children involved as well.
And you have to, because the person that benefits is us. It's the lawyers. Even if we probably don't have much time to spend to go away, ultimately, all the money you're paying, all this animosity that's being created means more letters, more court proceedings, and it just means more money for us. And I know I'm talking myself out of money, but if you have kids, try and settle.
Yeah. And going into that business element, obviously with the theme of don't do that, do this, are there any, from scaling your business to meet demand, are there any lessons learned that you would like to share with anyone listening that's building a business regardless of sector?
I mean, don't think you can do it all. For a long time, because I was building the Madeleine Mendy brand, I felt that I needed to do all the work to make sure that it was done properly. So I'll say outsource or bring in staff. But then I went through having to recruit more staff. We were a smaller team, and then in the last few months, we've recruited more staff. And what I would have to say to that is recruit well. That's very important, because you are adding in, it's a bit like a body, and you're adding in a new body part. If that body part doesn't fit, you need to remove that straight away, because it will pollute the rest. And I think that's very important.
I think it's also clear with your approach that you've taken a customer's first approach, which gives you that trust and that likability quite quickly that you've got, because it is your business, right?
It is.
To go through the process, but pushing back earlier on, whilst you might have saved that marriage and they don't become a customer, that person's always going to remember you, and they're going to say, "Hey, you need to speak to Madeleine."
Yes.
And then obviously that would help you to afford those large slabs of chocolate that we talked about pre-interview, right? Because those aren't cheap.
Definitely not. But and that's one of the things I pride myself with. I really try to help people. I know there's a financial element to it, but I speak to clients that I haven't spoken to for 3 years, 4 years. I'm just checking on them. On my way here, a client that decided to go to another lawyer, I knew he had a hearing on Monday. I called him and said, "Look, how did it go?" Because it's not just a file on your desk; it's people. So it's important, and we pride ourselves on saying, "Look, we don't advertise; it's word of mouth." So yes, I didn't do your marriage, I didn't do your divorce, but maybe someone or someone else around might need our services, and it's worked so far.
And I think that's really key. I mean, you have an amazing social media presence. Some of the very direct, very informative, and I think that's something else for people to listen. Even if you're in the most happiest, wonderful marriage, we all have friends that need support.
Yes.
So I would recommend anybody to follow you on Instagram, because you talk broadly as well around family law. It's very obvious that you care. It's been so lovely to be in your company. And I'm sure, going back to the start of the podcast, when you were saying as an 11-year-old, you knew what you wanted to do. You're honouring that inner child brilliantly, I must say. So thank you.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.